Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Line podcast. Today we have Raphael Ouzan, CEO and co-founder of A.Team, a team formatted platform that enables tech leaders to assemble, deploy, and manage cloud-based teams, high-performing distributed product teams that build transformative new products. Raphael, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only, in your background and your experience, but also what we chat about a little bit before the show about the change and how teams are, and the companies are really having to not only get the right people, but also create the right environment and also manage that team to make sure that they're hitting the target. That there's so much, all that sounds simple. There's so much intricacies and nuances that actually allow teams to be able to perform at that level. And so I'm curious, obviously, and for the audience sake, to dive into that. But before we get into EP and what you're working on now, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So before starting the company, I felt so a little bit of background. I didn't go to college, but instead I had the chance to go to the military. So I was there for 5 years doing cyber warfare and cryptography in Israel. And that's when I first felt the power of teams coming together. In the army, it's kind of in this extreme situation where you've got a bunch of 18 years old conscripts that have to tackle really big kind of world-class challenges that typically the people that are supposed to deal with the things are way more educated than you are, way older, way better paid. And that showed to me the power of teams. So when I left the military, I knew it was very clear to me that what I wanted to do in my life is to be able to work on really meaningful problems with great people that I want to work with. That I knew that if I was in a situation to do that, then it would be amazing. At the time, the only way to really do that was to build startups. So that's what I did. I built startups, built an organization that does deep tech retraining and upskilling. So for some reason, I was compelled by the problems of, or the opportunity rather, of using technology to unlock human potential. And that's what I've had a chance to do for a while. So before A.Team, I was really looking for A.Team. I've been playing around that space for over a decade before then. And after I sold my previous company, started doing a little bit of investing. I was an entrepreneur in residence at Thrive Capital and started investing also with a fund that we set up with Marc, Rowan called BlockNation. And I wanted to learn how the best companies in the world function. Yeah. And every time it was kind of the same takeaway, which is the gap is actually not capital as we typically know it, but rather human capital. And I realized then that what I was feeling, that I wanted to have the autonomy to choose the problem that I work on and to work with people that I really wanted to work with is something that in a way we all feel and aspire to. Except before A.Team, most people had to kind of either be born very wealthy and then they don't care, they can do whatever they want, but it's not exactly a choice, or they just had to work their entire life to finally achieve professional freedom. So the question behind A.Team that kind of triggered this whole thing was, hey, wait a second. What if we could enable this emerging category of product builders? So think like product managers, designers, engineers, data scientists, growth marketers, et cetera, people who have this like really powerful skills that can create essentially exponential value, to say, you know what, we don't need to be restrained by the rigid structures of typical employment. We can actually go and choose the work that we want to work on and choose the people that we work with. And with that, establishing kind of the future of what we call cloud-based teams, those fractional teams. And you see now this whole way of working that has been propelled forward extremely fast with all the recent events of the past few years that enable more and more people to participate in that kind of new way of the new economy that puts the builders, the people who can build things, at the center of it and provides them freedom and autonomy.
Yeah. It's so fascinating thinking about human capital being a constraint. And if what were you seeing out for other companies? Was it in lack of skill set? Was it not the right players or finding talent, attracting talent? When you talk about the deficits, what were some things that you thought the company, and I don't want to say failing or not doing so well on, but seeing as a constraint within that human capital? One particular was stopping them from having a productive team, having a high-performing team. Was it the assembly of those individuals? I'm curious on what key things that you saw were not going well in some organizations, and what other organizations that were going well, what they were doing right.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is basically employment as we know it and the way the companies are structured is super outdated. It hasn't really changed much, right? In hundreds of years, really. Like since we left the field to go into factories, it's pretty much remained the same way, which is you have a list of people you need, you hire those people, and then you have them do some kind of work together during the day. And that's about it. But
Yeah.
we've completely changed in the past few decades in terms of what generates value. And in the knowledge economy, what we're looking for is exponential output. And to create exponential output, particularly when we talk about tech and we talk about tech builders, turns out there's some elements that really matter. And it's not just about remote or not remote. It's much bigger than this is, hey, do I even care about this? Right?
Yeah.
Because if I care about this, you care about it, and we work well together, we'll have that much more likelihood of producing something that is truly significant. So the old model that is kind of structured in terms of departments and headcounts, things like that, is like, has been broken for a while. And you see this now more than ever, right? Every company is kind of like doing those massive layoffs, which is basically something that happens on an ongoing basis in a lesser capacity because it's structured around headcount versus being because of structuring work around missions or initiatives, which is what we're actually compelled to do. So we're in a situation now that is even more acute than it used to be, where the market pressure that is pushing every company in the world to think in terms of efficiency is kind of encouraging companies to think of better ways to do things. And for professionals, they had a big realization this year, which is that this sense of stability that comes from the kind of typical 9-to-5 employment is gone, or at least that illusion has been shattered. You see that with the great betrayal now, right? Of so many people being laid off kind of overnight. They log in like, oh, I can't log in, I guess. I'll just let go. But in tech, for 15 years, tech giants have basically tried to hoard and monopolize all the brains, showering them with perks. And then suddenly it's like gone, right? Yeah. So this is the kind of new era where people realize, wait, I have to be self-reliant. Like I cannot just rely on one employer. So you see this like massive change that's happening, and the gap for human capital is really because when you think about it, every business problem is really a talent problem at the end of the day. So this is the difference between success and failure, but also between being able to take advantage of opportunities versus not.
Yeah. And I wonder if you have if you have any numbers you can share on the impact that human capital has if it's not run efficiently and successfully, and having that, whether it's the right team members or the right structure or organization. What it was the difference between a company, rather than obviously the extreme is one company fails, the other company succeed. Outside of that, what are some of the outcomes that companies will see if they have a human capital problem? Do you have any of those numbers that you can share, or I guess any anecdotes on where that's been most, I guess, present in your experience? Yeah.
So first of all, we anecdotally, I think we all know that there are better teams and lesser teams. So to crack the code on how to make significantly more optimized teams is very significant. Now, productivity is not exactly a metric that we know how to measure as an industry, particularly not in tech. Like for some reason, for the longest time, there was, in a way, there's like so much money in that space, or there used to be at the very least, that didn't really matter. It's like, okay, just more of everything. Now, this doesn't work anymore because every board is telling the company, look, like you can't spend too much ahead of revenue. So you need to be able to invest and divest. So that agility at the workforce level. And that's true for every company. Like think about, I gave this talk like a really long time ago. Someone founded somehow, it was called like How to Build the A.Team, which is kind of funny. It was like maybe 12 years ago even. And the proposition I had then was, we talked a lot about lean startup, which is like essentially failing fast. And that it's good to fail fast because then you can iterate. I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely right and great. There's one thing though that you cannot fail fast at, and that's the core team. So when you think about a seed stage company that has a little bit of money to kind of get going, they don't really know what will work. And if they hire the wrong people, at least as full-time employees, they're going to run out of money and die before they fix a mistake. Because letting go of people is extremely hard, both emotionally and just takes always longer than you'd like. And turns out that you got to fine tune, you got to iterate on your core team just as much as you're iterating your product, because your product is changing, the priorities are changing, your understanding of the market and the positioning is changing. So really at every level, you see that having that agility with a mix of contractors in a specialized area of things and full-time employees is like, that's the right mix, which basically shows that companies are now morphing to not just go from thinking in terms of headcount and departments, but rather in terms of initiatives but also bring agility, not just to software development, but also to company building. So if you ask about numbers for that, today in the network of A.Team, we have close to 9,000 of some of the most highly skilled product builders. We've never really marketed that. In fact, we were in stealth for 2.5 years, and the network has grown exponentially, even though it's very hard to get into it. Like we have long vetting processes, and you typically need to be referred by someone that worked with you before and so forth. But the thing has been growing like crazy, and the interest is very significant. And we see that the interest is not just at every level of seniority. Like you see independent contributors, you see heads of products, you see founders who've exited companies, you see executives from Fortune 500 that are saying, you know what, I'd rather have more of a portfolio career because I want to be able to work on really interesting things that I choose to work on with people I want to work with. Yeah. And it's also how they better their skills. So you see that shift happening very significantly. And on the company side, we have the chance to work with, incubate a bunch of startups, work with many of the most significant scale-ups, all the way to Fortune 500. And we've seen companies that, so you see on one end of the spectrum, early stage startups that are building with A.Team as they build kind of hybrid full-time, part-time teams as I just described. But you also see incumbents, like really big companies that are not tech native companies at all, that are certainly shipping products the way you would expect like a Google or Facebook to be able to do.
Yeah. And it's funny, the whole transition to distributed talent. A lot of people think that it's just companies trying to bootstrap and being cost effective, but a lot of other, most companies, if you talk to them, really describe the access to highly skilled talent in unconventional ways. And being, whether it's full-time employment, being that's the more conventional way, whether it's contract or any other setup, there's a lot of gray area in there. And so I'm curious to hear, for the clients you have, the companies and the product that the A-teams are building, how has the landscape of distributed team changed, and where are we finding the best talent? It's not localized anymore. It's everywhere. And how are you helping those individuals come together as a team?
Yeah. So you're right. It's not localized to a particular place. Like, it can be everywhere, especially throughout COVID. People have been traveling a lot. And it's also not just about best talent in a way. The same way that some investors talk about founder market fit, that it's not just about product having market fit. It's also the founder being the right founder to solve this particular problem. I think the same goes for, in a way, talent, right? You want a talent company fit and talent product fit. It's not just about, if I take this person who is like great at all the exams, and that means that person is going to be excellent at executing and producing what we need to accomplish. Yeah. There's a part to this that is really important, which is enabling people to choose what they care about, to work on things that matter to them, on problems that matter to them. Now, when you think about company mission and things like that, the early stage is enough because the company will do things very much in that vicinity and will be very clear how your impact is relevant to the bottom line of the company. But very quickly, you kind of lose that. And I think anyone who's scaling past even a couple dozen people, it becomes really hard to understand how me as a software engineer or as a designer, et cetera, I'm actually impacting the company. So think about companies that have thousands of people, like then it becomes very, very diluted. So it turns out that distributed teams and this type of thinking is not just about whether people are remote or not, and whether you have hubs all over the world. It's really about, are you enabling and empowering builders, whether they're full-time or contractors, to work on the problems that at first they understand what it is, not just the tasks that they're doing, right? So you bring that at the initiative level, but also to actually care, that have that fit with, I want to go solve this. Because that's how you're going to get the intangible that is so powerful, which is not just doing the tickets and making them happen, but rather really understanding how to get to the goal you want to get to, how to deliver on the vision that you have for a particular challenge. And that's when you get to exponential results. Yeah. So that's what distributed work enables, but it's not enough. It's about how you structure the company and how you communicate with people and how you empower to solve problems versus doing tasks or little projects.
Right. And the enabling piece is particularly interesting because a lot of people are like, I think I enable my team, or whether it's giving them the tools that they need or having, say, structured review sessions or things like that. But and that's typically not enough to really utilize some of these skills that put them in a best position to not only succeed, but also grow. What can companies do better to put those individuals in that situation? Is it knowing more about them? Is it having more insight into better ways to set up their organization? What in particular can companies do to actually not only utilize that talent skill set, but put them in a position to succeed and help them grow?
Yeah, I like this question because it's actually super practical how to do it. It's like if you go to a company that has multiple teams, you ask the team members, hey, can you describe to me what it looks like if you do everything you want to do and you succeed in like 6 months, right? It's like right now, a lot of people are finalizing Q2 plans. Ask them at the end of Q2, you've done all the things you wanted to do. What does that look like? I think you'll be surprised to see that most people cannot describe it. Sometimes even team leaders can't even describe it. Yeah, because we get bogged down with tasks, with projects, and it's actually hard to have, like we find that successful teams have mission focus and trust.
Yeah.
So, but everything really starts with mission focus, and to have mission focus, you need mission clarity. So to be able to elevate the conversation and elevate the way you work and you communicate with the teams to the level of outcome. And if you create teams that are essentially outcome driven, that are cross-functional, that means they have agency over solving that particular problem.
Yeah.
Right? Versus like, oh, I'm doing those tasks and then some other department or teams is going to take on those things and do something with it and whatever. Instead of doing that, you basically say, okay, I have those initiatives. And then when you ask yourself the question of, you ask yourself the most important question, which is, what is the best team to maximize the chances of accomplishing this initiative? And when you start having the conversation this way, what it does is it enables people to really rally around an outcome. Yeah. And that's when you get the type of engagement that is so significant to solve higher order challenges. And that's something that any company can do, is just a slight change in thinking to go from kind of the headcount department thinking to the initiative-based teams.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, one thing that you hit that's I think rings hard is the outcomes piece, being that you don't hire for a particular skill set, you hire for the skill set that's going to give you the successful outcome you want. They don't need to have every technology. They need to have whatever specifically you need for that particular task, and an individual who can learn that other auxiliary skills that might, that might influence the completion of that task. But a lot of companies, I think, still go for checking boxes and crossing off and kind of validating by not even just credentials, but by certificates or accolades and things like that, rather than focusing on the outcome.
Yeah, and this is the reliance that we had a lot on titles and things like that. Like if you go to LinkedIn, basically, like the way you assess someone is the companies they've been at and how fancy their titles have been. What we try to do with A.Team is to focus on a different data set, which is what people have built and who they've built it with. So when you asked before, how do we enable the formation of great teams? Well, we can basically, everything we talked about, we do with the companies that we work with. So basically we asked them, okay, what are the most significant initiatives that what is your top milestone if it's a small company that you're trying to accomplish, raising money, monetization, whatever it may be, going into that market, this market. And what are the top 3 initiatives that you're currently working on that are not moving well enough or fast enough? What areas of expertise you feel you have gaps in, and what initiative you wish it started but didn't. And then once we have the answers to this question, we can help translate that into, okay, you currently have this people working on this, amazing. Now let's do a team spec to see what the ideal team would look like. And that goes to the platform, identifies the right cluster of people that, not just to your point, have the skill set and the experience, but that can also work well together. And then that actually want to work within this particular problem. So what you get is, hey, here's the best team for the job and here's why. Here are the people and so on. But although here is why they're excited to work with you on this particular. And that's how basically we kind of reorganize in a way the way work happens. And that's how you can do much more with fewer people because they actually care about it and they have the right skill set and can work well together. So that's how you get to that productivity where people can be in the zone and actually doing the things that very few people can do.
Yeah. And who's responsible for that? We think about maybe it's the founder, it's the CEO, it's the COO, it's the Chief People Officer. If I'm thinking about it from a founder's point of view, or even if I have a co-founder relationship, who's responsible for that and how is that carried out? That kind of philosophy around building towards outcomes and projects and then assembling the team and then enabling the team, and kind of goes down from there.
If you're an early stage startup, you're kind of in effect building the operating system with the DNA of your company with every decision, even the mundane ones, and creating clarity and figuring out the initiatives, what matters most and what matters less, is the most important thing that founders can do. As the company grows, though, you have multiple people that participate. They're essentially on a team that it's kind of like a product manager team where the product is the company, right? So that's the people leadership function, maybe finance, operation, et cetera, whoever is in there, kind of figuring out how to do planning and like those type of things, how to think about people you hire and all of that. So more and more people are in charge of that, but I think it starts very much with the DNA of the company you want to create and the way you want to empower people. Like there's something about building a moat for companies, not just in terms of the defensibility in the market, but also the way that they attract and work well and retain with great people that actually care about what you're doing. It's in the culture, but also in the way you structure work. So I would say it's very much the leadership and founder's role, but then it becomes the team leader's role as well. Because if that's kind of the sense of ownership where I can be a team leader in the company, and if I'm just okay doing tasks, when I don't really understand how it matters, what success looks like, and so forth, that's one way to do it. But I could also push back and say, like, wait a second, like we have limited resources. This is difficult here in the market. Every dollar matters. And the opportunity cost matters because I could be doing interesting things. Like I need to have the context to understand how this matters and what is the actual outcome here.
Right.
So ultimately it becomes on all of us.
Yeah. It's amazing to think. And it's also, I think, one thing that goes undervalued. I think a lot of companies do it, and maybe it's almost a cliche, but I think that's why the mission of a company kind of sets the expectation for what you want to accomplish and the value kind of structure. Okay, how do we go about accomplishing that? What are our philosophies around how we interact as a team and as a company and what our focus is on? It's pushing the needle forward, or it's giving 100% feedback, or communicating, all these different things that kind of set up the stage for how you should interact as an organization. So it's awesome to hear.
Plus, I would add something. Sorry, I just would add, particularly on the early stage piece, that, if I recall, like the first company I built, and I had a lot of kind of black and white beliefs on how to hire, how to build. Like I wanted people with me forever type of thing. And like, this is that type of thing. And then the way I've done it after that a few times, like completely changed. And I think now 2023 is a weird year, right? There's like all kinds of stuff going on, and there's so much uncertainty. So much so that the only certainty is the fact that every couple of weeks, we're going to have a new black swan type of event that we would have never expected to see. I think that's a bit clear by now because it's been the case for quite a while now. And when you think about how, and the best explanation of, I think, what's going on is basically acceleration. Everything that will happen happens faster, right? Faster and faster and faster. So I think it's hard for us to intuit as smart people I've written about. So founder today that's building a company needs to, in a way, relinquish the things that we used to take for granted. Right. The typical thing that the startups say early on is, I hire the best people. That's not true. Like you typically hire the people that you can afford, that are generalist enough because you don't exactly know what you're doing. The best people to solve a particular problem, they're extremely expensive and they probably would not join a seed stage company. And also you don't want them to, it doesn't really make sense because you could be wrong. You may want to move, etc. So I think to be super agile and to look at how to build teams in a way that is really taking advantage of the way that things work, but creating flexibility into as many decisions as possible. And the way you kind of build up your team and your organization is absolutely critical because technology is advancing very quickly and weird things are happening all the time in the market, right? It's almost like that impossible reality where you have on one end, like war here, there, the market, banks collapsing. And on the other end, you have like the most incredible tech advancement that humanity has been able to produce with like generative AI, shuffling the deck for everyone. It's like, how does all these things happening at once? Well, this is the world we live in.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the traction of A.Team. How many professionals do you have in the network, and how many companies are using the amazing team to build amazing products? Where are you at now, and what are you particularly excited about in terms of the next frontier of A.Team?
We have the chance to grow super fast, working with hundreds of companies from early stage startup to Fortune 500. We're particularly in times like this when everybody needs that flexibility and efficiency and kind of a few 10x type of teams and people to supercharge their teams or create new ones. Like makes all the difference. So we have this really, and what I'm excited about is the opportunity to establish A.Team as that building block for companies that are going to make it this year and not just make it, but actually thrive in ways that they could have never done before, because there's something about creating the agility of full-time, part-time, having super powerful teams with fewer people that can do way more. That's really significant. So I'm excited for us to keep doing that on the startup front, on the scale-up front, on the large company front. So we're very much expanding very quickly to address that traction. On the network side, we're still very, very selective, and both on the company side and the talent side. We're very, very selective. We're not trying to grow too fast. As I mentioned, it's like close to 9,000 people. But the cool thing about it now is that we have team leaders and CTOs and CPOs and everything in between. So you've got the people that are really, really good at 0 to 1. You've got the people that are really, really good at teaming up and creating like prototypes, to scaling, to maintenance, to all kinds of different capabilities. So you can have the true best-in-class expertise, even if it's fractional, to help take, like there's a there. I think it's pretty fair to say that there's every company on the planet right now, like there are either incredible things that it could be building that are leveraging their core assets, like what they're uniquely good at already.
Yeah.
Or they have a problem they're currently trying to tackle that with the right team behind them, and maybe it's just like 1 or 2 more people helping on certain things, could be absolutely unlocked, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm excited about, to, at the end of the day, have the opportunity to transform how companies build and therefore how people work.
Yeah. And what are some of the biggest risks that A.Team faces?
I think it's tricky for any company to, like today we have the conundrum of, I think, most companies, which is how do you, like we're early in our journey enough that we have this like really big vision and there's a lot of things we want to build, and things require a lot of investment. On the other end, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So should we prioritize like short-term type of work to get to the financial stability much earlier than otherwise we would in a different market for tech? So I think that's the making those decisions well, and then they're never binary. They're somewhere on the spectrum is tricky. Like the thing that I think myself and the team are most excited about is to we feel like we just got started with A.Team essentially. Like I think we're like 50% into the V1 of what A.Team is, like not even completed the V1. So being able to invest in that is really important, but it has to be done in a reasonable and very well thought out way in times like this.
Yeah. I know you mentioned it already, but just you said it in stone, if everything goes well, what the long-term vision for A.Team?
That A.Team would be the home on the internet for the world's best builders. I think that builders at companies, whether it's founders or leaders or executives that run transformation at big companies, independent builders that want to be working on the most interesting things, like well know that A.Team is the place that has been designed fully for them to enable them to do the best work of their career with their favorite people, while having autonomy and flexibility to make the decisions that shape their life, their career, and enable them, while having the support of a curated community of like-minded peers. I think that's ultimately where we're going.
Yeah. I would like the next section, I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with rapid fire questions and then we'll see where we go. So just to break into it, I would like to ask this, what's particularly hard about your job today?
That it changes. It changes every other week. To like learn that it's a new company, it's a new job.
Yeah. Thinking about the teams and people who are building things, whether they're at a company already or not, or kind of whatever in the background experience is at the time, what does that mean in terms of measuring company success, not being headcount anymore, not being, what stage of fundraising, but being focused more on products? Do you see that we're shifting to focus more on products and the success of those, or is that still kind of one camp and then the other camp is still and focused on fundraising and headcount and things like that? What are you seeing? Are you seeing a shift, or are you seeing kind of two options?
That's a great question. It's a great question. The shift is happening really fast, and actually not thanks to us, but really thanks to the need for efficiency this year, where every board essentially is looking at, from any company size, is looking at my investments and what the expected ROI. So that means initiative A, got to invest whatever, $1 million. I'm hoping to get $10 million. I'm going to get 5 this year, another 5 next year.
Yeah.
So we got to, there's no other way but to look at it that way. I would encourage anyone who's not thinking that way to do it. And then therefore, as part of that question, there's the team behind it. And that's how you measure basically your ability to turn investment into value.
Yeah, I'm thinking about your founder experience and all the experience that you've had with startups you've been, a part of, whether working as a leader or as an employee or even as an investor. What makes, and you mentioned this earlier about human capital, but what outside of that, what makes startups successful in regards to the operational foundation that they have? And what I mean by this is I've talked to a few founders and a lot of things that they learned over the years was that they create the foundation in a certain way, have those expectations for not only culture, but even systems and all the decisions you made. You mentioned it earlier. But what are some of those ways that companies that are scaling and being successful, earning more revenue, increasing their profit? What does their foundation look like? If it was a machine and you looked inside of the engine, what am I seeing in the box? What are the components that make a successful company?
A long list of things, but I would say this. First, nothing about building a company. The company is what comes later. And sometimes we get caught up. Like it's very easy for when tackling a problem that is as challenging as building something new, we tend to gravitate as human beings towards the thing that we have more control over. I don't necessarily have control whether the market's going to respond the way I want it to, but I do have control over like all the things that I do that startups need to do, that companies need to do. Focusing on those things is a waste of time, at least early on, right? Particularly pre-market fit. You don't care about company, whatever. It's just like about getting to where you want to go. And then I would say, once you're there, once you start building a company, think about it as an evolving organism. And I would say I think there's something about the people that you bring around the table that changes everything, because you can never fully control success, but you can control certain things, which is, are you giving it the best possible odds? And do you have fun and intellectual kind of reward and fulfillment from working with the best people on the planet on significant problems? At least that's what drives me. Yeah. And I realize that it's kind of a mindset that you need to have, which is, look, if what I'm working on is important enough to at least some people, then these people I can bring along and they can help me. Maybe not all of them as full-time employees, and that's okay, right? But rather making sure around the table of the right teams to drive the initiatives that need to accomplish. That creates DNA in a significant way. And I would say, lastly, diversity. Diversity is this point that can be construed in all kinds of ways. But I realized a part of it that I think is overlooked, which is that most early stage companies are very homogeneous. Because you tend to hire people that you know, or that friends of friends within a particular location potentially, and it's very uniform. So when we built A.Team using A-Teams, so we have a bunch of A-Teamers and that are working with us. A lot of the full-time employees that we have actually are A-Teamers that converted full-time. So it took us a year or so to meet in person because we're in the thick of COVID. And then when I did, I looked around and was like, wow, I've never seen so many people that come from different places, that have different age, that have different background, different perspective, different English accent, but they view the world in very different ways. So when we collaborate on things, you realize that we have the same values. So it's actually really easy to communicate and bond, even over Zoom and whatever. And it's really powerful to get the diversity because that challenges our view on everything, including on culture, including on, you get the type of perspectives, you get exposure to perspectives that you otherwise would never have. And that enabled us to create something that is truly valuable, not just for the type of people that I went to college with, even though I didn't get to college as I mentioned, but like I went to the army with in my case, but rather this is something that is really appealing and really exciting to the types of people that have those values in a way that resonates globally, essentially. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So diversity, I would say, is overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And diversity, in my opinion, I think rather than, I think a lot of people think about who do I have in my team and what buckets do I kind of check off and am I including versus I think personally, it's just how closely can I represent the world population or even on my current population, my local population to be able to give me the perspective I need to kind of consider all the different possibilities of our business outcomes, of how our products can communicate to customers, how our clients, all those things. I think that a diverse team, quote unquote, is one that represents people and in the population, right? And really getting that foundation around an understanding. I always like to ask this question because I love how founders kind of extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest, whether it's early in your career or now. What books or people have influenced you the most?
The person that influences the most is my wife, because she's the founder and CEO of an incredible company called HiredScore. So she certainly has a lot of impact on me. I used to help her out when she was getting started. And 10 years later, she's helping me out because she's way further along.
Yeah.
I think in terms of, but I'm learning, I have a chance to work with incredible people, both our investors and then our team, like people who experience a lot of things. Like I was talking about that exposure and diversity piece. In May, we're actually going to Sicily. We're going to gather with the whole team with 100+ people, and can't wait to meet them because I'm learning so much from people. Yeah, I also never met in person for some of them. In terms of books, what had a lot of impact on me, I think the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I think is one that has been super helpful. So much so that I'm making sure that every one of us reads it and internalize it. And we're kind of crafting those little workshops around them. I think it's pretty good because ultimately that's how us human beings do things, right?
Yeah.
We figure out ways to work together, to figure out how to deal with shared adversity, with a shared set of values from like actual day one of humanity. Like that was the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's what we're learning to do better forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to make sure we didn't leave, last couple of questions here is I always like to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table. So if there any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you would have liked to answer, anything come to mind?
I think you covered some of the big things. I think it's mostly on us to say like, this is a challenging time for startups, which I believe a lot of people are hearing from that audience. Well, it's a challenging time for sure. And I welcome people to reach out and see if we can help in any way in terms of, we can't help in all the ways, but in some of the ways, which are quite important, which is figuring out the teams that you work with, the talent that you work with that accelerates you and enable you and will crack the challenges that will get you where you want to go. And ultimately, it's about that. So just recognizing that this is a time where helping each other out matters. It's about creating unity as much as we can and togetherness because these are crazy new times and learning together is much faster.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Raphael. We've had such a great time not only learning about your background, your experience with startups, but also kind of the transition and the difference that the companies or the different strategy companies are using to not only focus on business outcomes, but get the right people onto those teams and do so efficiently and effectively. And on the other side, for teams of people to really come together to do what they do best, solve problems, build products, really kind of enable their skill set to also grow. It's going to be interesting to see where the ecosystem of kind of auxiliary teams and company building kind of goes, as you mentioned, cool, kind of interesting group of core team members and contractors and kind of this whole ecosystem that allows businesses to run and operate super efficiently and effectively. And so last little bit before we complete the calls, I want to know, and the audience wants to know where to support you. Where can we find you? Where can we find A.Team? Give us your website, your LinkedIn. Where can we be a support of you and the company you're building? Give us your Twitters, wherever you want to feed to the audience. We'd love to get where we can support.
Sure. Yeah. I'll send you all those links. As far as A.Team goes, like we like to vet every company that we give access to them and help out. So I can share with you a special link that'll get you ahead on the wait list. So that we'll know it comes from here and to give it all the attention it deserves. So yeah, happy to share my LinkedIn, Twitter, and all of this. We like to kind of engage in conversation as things are changing. And we talked about learning faster together. Yeah. Whoever wants to participate in the conversation on the topics of great betrayal and future of company building and what new models people are experimenting, love to engage with that. I do it on LinkedIn a bunch. So feel free to ask questions, comment, share your agreement or disagreement. And we'll build better things together.
Amazing. Raphael, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I hope you enjoyed yourself on the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
I sure did. Yes. Wonderful question. Thank you so much.
Of course.